The year was 2347, and humanity had finally earned its place among the stars. After 200 years of exploring space, building colonies, and making careful friendships with alien species, Earth's representatives sat in the great crystal halls of the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Varith Prime. Ambassador Linda Morris stood before the assembly of 12 alien species. Her silver diplomatic robes caught the light from the floating orbs that lit the massive chamber. She had spent 15 years building relationships with the various council members. She had learned their customs and understood their fears. But today, all of that work seemed meaningless. High Arbiter Zulkith rose from his elevated platform. He was a towering creature with 4 arms and scales that changed color between purple and black. His species, the Valorian Collective, had controlled galactic politics for 3,000 years. When he spoke, everyone listened. "The Council has reached a decision about the human expansion territories," Zulkith announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. "Your species has broken 17 territorial agreements. You have moved into protected space belonging to 5 member civilizations. You have shown aggressive behavior that threatens galactic stability." Linda felt her heart sink, but she kept her face calm. "High Arbiter, if I may speak to these accusations directly. The colonies in question were built in sectors that were clearly marked as unclaimed. Those markings were on all official charts given to us by this very council." A harsh clicking sound came from Delegate Thrixner of the Mantid Hegemony. He was an insect-like creature, standing 8 feet tall, with razor-sharp limbs. "The charts were correct when we gave them to you. Human expansion has simply grown faster than we expected. This is exactly the problem. You expect us to apologize for growing?" Linda asked carefully. Zulkith ignored her question and continued speaking. "Humanity will follow these terms immediately. You will leave the 17 colony worlds in the disputed territories. You will reduce your military fleet by 70%. You will accept population controls that limit your species to 12 billion individuals across all settlements, and you will accept the permanent presence of council oversight committees on Earth and all major human worlds." The chamber became completely silent. Linda felt the blood drain from her face, but she forced herself to keep standing tall. She could feel the eyes of every alien delegate watching her, waiting for her response. "These terms would end human sovereignty," she said quietly. "You are asking us to give up our freedom." "These terms will ensure galactic peace," Zulkith replied coldly. "You have 30 standard days to begin following them. If you fail to do so, the combined fleets of the Council will force you to comply. This session is over." The alien delegates began leaving the chamber. Linda stood alone in the vast hall, her mind racing. She activated her secure communication device hidden beneath her skin. "Get me Admiral Patricia Cole on the Endeavor. We have a serious problem." Back on Earth, President Samuel Green listened to the transmission in his private office at the New Geneva, headquarters of the United Earth Government. His chief advisor, Dr. Helen Park, stood beside him. Her face had gone pale as she heard the Council's demands. "They cannot be serious," Helen whispered. "Population controls. Foreign soldiers on our soil?" Samuel leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. He was 62 years old and had dedicated his entire life to serving humanity. He had handled economic disasters, terrible storms, and even the brief but bloody Mars Rebellion of 2339. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. "Contact every senior military commander and cabinet member," he said finally. "Emergency meeting in 4 hours. And Helen, keep this quiet for now. If the public finds out before we have a plan, there will be panic in the streets." Nodded and hurried out of the office. Samuel remained seated, thinking about the billions of human lives that now depended on his decisions. Far away, in orbit above the colony world of New Haven, Captain Daniel Shaw received the coded alert on the bridge of the heavy cruiser Resolute. He read the message twice, then a third time, before turning to his executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, set condition yellow throughout the ship. "All department heads to the conference room in 20 minutes. Maria frowned with concern. "Sir, may I ask what this is about?" Daniel handed her the datapad. He watched her eyes grow wide as she read the terrible news. "They are actually threatening us," she breathed. "They want us to give up everything." "That is what it looks like." Daniel turned and gazed out the viewport at the blue-green world below. 2 million human colonists lived on New Haven. Farmers, teachers, children, families who had built new lives on a distant world. The council wanted them to abandon their homes. "We have less than a month to decide what kind of species we want to be," Daniel said quietly. Maria looked at her captain with determination in her eyes. "What kind of species do you think we should be, sir?" Daniel did not answer right away. He thought about his own family back on Earth, his parents, his sister, his young niece, who had just started school. He thought about the colony below and the millions of people who had trusted their government to protect them. "I think," he said slowly, "that we should be the kind of species that does not abandon its own people, the kind that does not bow to threats, the kind that our ancestors would be proud of." Maria nodded. "Then I guess we have our answer." On Varith Prime, High Arbiter Zolkith retired to his private chambers after the council session. His advisors gathered around him, celebrating what they saw as a great victory. "The humans will submit," declared Commander Vectos, the leader of the Valorian military forces. "They have no choice. Our combined fleets outnumber theirs 10-1. They are a young species, barely out of their cradle world. They will see reason." Zolkith was not so certain. He had watched Ambassador Maurice during the session. He had seen something in her eyes that troubled him. It was not fear or despair. It was something harder, something colder. "Do not underestimate them," the High Arbiter warned. "They are different from the other species we have dealt with." Vakthos laughed dismissively. "Different how?" "They are soft creatures of flesh and blood. They value individual freedom and personal happiness. They make art and music instead of weapons. They are no threat to us." "Perhaps," Zolkith replied, but deep in his mind, a small voice whispered that they had made a terrible mistake. That voice would prove to be right. Back on Earth, the emergency session had begun. Leaders from every continent and every colony gathered in the Great Hall. President Green stood before them and delivered the news. When he finished, the room exploded with angry voices. Some called for immediate surrender. Others demanded war. A few suggested trying to negotiate. But slowly, a consensus began to form. It was spoken first by Admiral Patricia Cole, a woman who had served in the military for 40 years. "They have given us a choice between slavery and death," she said. "But they do not understand something important about humanity. For us, those two options are exactly the same thing. We would rather die fighting than live on our knees." The room fell silent as her words sank in. Then, one by one, the leaders began to nod. They were going to fight, and the galaxy would never be the same. The emergency session in New Geneva lasted 18 hours. When it finally ended, President Samuel Green stood before the combined leadership of humanity's military, scientific, and political organizations. Every face in the room showed exhaustion, but also determination. "We have chosen our path," he announced. "We will not give up a single world. We will not accept foreign soldiers on our soil, and we will not allow any power in this galaxy to tell us how many children we can have. If the Council wants a war, they will get one they never imagined possible." Admiral Patricia Cole stepped forward to explain the military situation. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen many battles. "The Council has us greatly outnumbered on paper. Their combined fleet has about 9,000 large warships. We have just over 800. But our intelligence tells us something important. They have never fought an enemy willing to fight without limits. Their wars have always been careful, controlled affairs. They follow old traditions and mutual agreements. They do not understand what humanity can do when our survival is threatened." Over the following 3 weeks, a remarkable transformation took place. Earth's colonies went dark. Communication stations were pulled back. Civilian ships were sent through hidden routes that only human navigators knew. To the watching council, it looked like humanity was simply frozen in terror. Unable to respond to the demands, they could not have been more wrong. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in tunnels that extended for hundreds of miles, Dr. Catherine Bell supervised the activation of Project Blackstone. This was a weapons research program that had been developed in complete secrecy for over 50 years. The technology it contained broke every rule of civilized warfare. That was exactly why no alien species knew it existed. The phase disruptors are coming online now, reported her lead engineer. A young man named Kevin Liu. His hands trembled slightly as he read the data on his screen. The theoretical power is confirmed. One of these devices could tear apart a battleship in seconds. Catherine nodded. Her face showed no emotion, but inside she felt a deep sadness. She had become a scientist to create things, to help people, to push the boundaries of knowledge. Now she was building weapons that would kill millions. But she thought of her daughter on the colony of New Haven, threatened with forced removal from her home, and her resolve hardened. "Begin mass production," she ordered. "I want 5,000 units ready within the week." On the colony world of Artemis IV, General Christopher Martinez assembled the largest ground force in human history. 3 million soldiers gathered on the vast plains outside the main city. They came from every nation on Earth and every colony among the stars. Unlike the professional armies of the Council species, these men and women were volunteers. They were fighting for their homes, their families, and their future. Christopher stood on a raised platform and addressed his troops. His voice was carried by speakers across the enormous crowd. "The Council thinks we are soft," he said. "They look at our art, our music, our love for individual freedom, and they assume we have forgotten how to fight. They have studied our recent history of peace and comfort, but they have not looked deeper. They do not remember what we did to each other before we reached the stars." He paused and let his words sink in. They do not understand that humanity learned to love peace precisely because we knew what war truly cost. We had spent thousands of years killing each other. Every terrible thing you can imagine we did to our own brothers and sisters. We chose peace because we were tired of blood, not because we had forgotten how to spill it. A roar of approval rose from the assembled soldiers. Christopher waited for it to quiet before continuing. "When this is over, the Council will understand, and they will never threaten our children again." The deadline came at midnight, Varith, Prime Standard Time. High Arbiter Zulkith sat in his command center, surrounded by advisors and military officers. He waited for the expected surrender message from the humans. He was certain they would see reason at the last moment. Instead, he received a single message from Ambassador Linda Morris, who had remained on the Council station despite the obvious danger. The message contained only 4 words. "You should have listened." Within hours, the first reports began flooding into Council headquarters. A Valorian patrol fleet near human space had gone completely silent. 17 ships vanished without a single distress call. A Mantid forward base had been destroyed, its wreckage scattered across 3 light-years of space. An observation post belonging to the Crystalline Accord had simply disappeared, leaving behind only strange radiation that Council scientists could not identify. Zulkith called an emergency meeting. But panic had already begun spreading among the member species. Several delegates demanded immediate negotiations with the humans. Others called for overwhelming force to crush the human threat before it could spread further. The careful unity of the Council, built over thousands of years, began to crack. Commander Vakthos, who had been so confident just weeks earlier, now looked pale and shaken. "This is impossible," he kept saying. "They should not have weapons capable of this destruction. Our intelligence showed nothing like this." "Your intelligence was wrong," Zulkith replied coldly. "The question now is what we do about it." In the chaos of the meeting, no one noticed that Ambassador Maurice had vanished from her quarters on the station. She had been quietly extracted by a human stealth ship 12 hours earlier. She was now traveling at maximum speed to meet up with the main human fleet, far from Varith Prime. Captain Daniel Shaw received his orders on the bridge of the Resolute. He read them carefully, then looked up at his crew with a grim expression. "We have been assigned to strike Group 7, he announced. "Our target is the Valorian shipyards at Korath Station. We will be facing odds of 10 to 1 against us." Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos raised her eyebrows. "That sounds like a suicide mission, sir." Not with what we are carrying in our weapons bay. The Council has no idea what is coming for them. By the time they figure it out, it will be too late. He turned to face the main view screen, which showed the endless stars of the galaxy. Somewhere out there, an arrogant civilization was about to learn a harsh lesson about humanity. Set course for Korath Station, Daniel ordered. Maximum speed. And tell the crew to get some rest. They're going to need it. The Resolute jumped to faster than light speed, joining hundreds of other human ships racing toward their targets. The greatest military operation in human history had begun. On Earth. President Green watched the fleet deployments on a massive holographic display in his command center. Each blue dot represented a human ship. Each red dot represented an enemy target. The dots were moving closer together with every passing minute.
May God forgive us for what we are about to do, he whispered.
Helen Parks stood beside him. We are defending ourselves. We did not ask for this war. No, we did not, Samuel agreed. But we are about to show them why they should never have started it. The war that would reshape the galaxy had truly begun, and humanity was done being afraid. The human attack began at the same moment across 12 star systems. Admiral Patricia Cole had divided her fleet into fast strike groups. Each group was equipped with the new phase disruptors and commanded by captains who had been trained to think for themselves and act without hesitation. Captain Daniel Shaw led Strike Group 7 toward the Valorian shipyards at Korath Station. His force had only 20 ships against an estimated 200 enemy vessels guarding the station. The numbers should have made victory impossible, but Daniel had studied Valorian tactics for years. He knew they were slow, predictable, and completely unprepared for human aggression. All ships, this is the Resolute, Daniel broadcast on the command channel. His voice was calm and steady. We hit them fast. We hit them hard. And we do not stop until the job is done. Remember what they threatened? Remember what they wanted to do to our families? No mercy, no hesitation. Shaw out. The human ships burst out of faster-than-light travel directly in the middle of the Valorian formation. It was a maneuver that every tactical manual said was impossible. The energy disruption alone should have torn the ships apart. But human engineers had found a way to shield their vessels. Another secret the Council knew nothing about. Before the Valorians could react, the phase disruptors opened fire. The weapons sent invisible beams of energy that disrupted matter at the deepest level. Ships that had been built to intimidate and overpower simply stopped existing. Their metal hulls, their powerful engines, their crews of thousands, all reduced to scattered atoms in the blink of an eye. The Valorian commander tried to organize a defense, but his orders were useless. His ships were designed for slow, careful engagements where both sides followed established rules. They had no tactics for an enemy that appeared from nowhere and killed without warning in less than 3 hours. Korath Station was a shattered ruin. Massive construction docks that had built warships for centuries now floated in pieces. Supply depots burned with fires that would take days to die. Strike Group 7 had not lost a single vessel. Daniel stood on the bridge of the Resolute and looked at the destruction his force had caused. He felt no joy, no satisfaction, only a grim determination to finish what had been started. Signal Admiral Cole, he ordered. Korath Station is neutralized, awaiting further instructions. Similar battles were happening across Council space. The Mantid home fleet, feared throughout the galaxy for its savage warriors, was ambushed before it could organize. 40 ships caught the fleet in a crossfire and destroyed it completely. The Crystalline Accord's famous fortress worlds were not even attacked directly. Human strike teams bypassed their defenses and destroyed their power generators and communication. Systems with precise strikes. The fortresses remained standing, but were now useless, cut off from each other and from the rest of their civilization. On the council capital of Vareth Prime, High Arbiter Zolkith received report after report of disasters. His military advisors gathered around the holographic display table, watching in horror as their carefully built empire crumbled. "How is this happening?" demanded Delegate Thrixener of the Mantid hegemony. His razor limbs clicked together in agitation. We outnumber them 10-1. We have thousands of years of military experience. They are children playing at war. Children with better weapons than ours, replied Commander Vakethos bitterly. Those phase disruptors are beyond anything in our research. We did not even know such technology was possible. Zolkith said nothing. He watched the display as another cluster of friendly ships disappeared, replaced by the cold emptiness of space. Somewhere out there, humans were celebrating these victories. He wondered if they felt any guilt for the lives they were taking. On Earth, President Green asked himself the same question. He sat alone in his office late at night, unable to sleep. The casualty reports were staggering. Millions of alien soldiers and civilians were dying as human forces swept through Council space. Each death weighed on his conscience. Helen Park found him there just before dawn. She had not slept either. You cannot blame yourself, she said gently. They started this war. We are just finishing it. That does not make me feel better, Samuel replied. Those were living beings. They had families, hopes, dreams, and we erased them from existence. They would have done the same to us. Worse, actually, they wanted to control our very ability to have children. They wanted to decide which humans could be born. Samuel nodded slowly. I know, and that is why we fight. But when this is over, we need to be better than they were. We need to offer peace, not just destruction. 6 weeks into the war, the final blow came. A human fleet of 400 ships, the largest gathering of military force in Earth's history, appeared in orbit above Varith Prime itself. The Council's remaining defenders rushed to protect their capital world, but they were outmaneuvered at every turn. Human commanders had studied every Council tactic and developed counters for all of them. General Christopher Martinez led the ground assault personally. He dropped with the first wave of Marines onto the crystal plains surrounding the Council citadel. The fighting was fierce, but short. Valorian soldiers had been bred for dominance. They were used to enemies who surrendered when they were clearly beaten. They had no idea how to handle humans who kept fighting even when wounded, even when surrounded, even when death was certain. The Marines pushed forward through streets that had never known war. Ancient buildings that had stood for thousands of years collapsed under weapons fire. Gardens that had been cultivated for centuries burned. By sunset, human forces had reached the walls of the citadel itself. Inside his command center, High Arbiter Zolkith watched the battle through security monitors. His four hands trembled as the situation grew worse by the minute. His species had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed empires, and shaped the fate of countless worlds. Now, in a matter of weeks, they were being defeated by a species they had dismissed as unimportant. Surrender, advised Velmuth, the elderly scholar who had warned against this war from the beginning. There is no shame in admitting defeat. Continuing to fight will only cause more death. But our honor, Zolkith protested weakly. Honor means nothing to the dead. And if we continue this war, there will be no Valorians left to care about honor. Outside the citadel, General Martinez received word that the enemy was ready to negotiate. He ordered his troops to hold their positions and wait. The fighting stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Maria Santos, who had requested transfer to the ground forces after the Korath battle, stood beside Christopher on a pile of rubble that had once been a monument to Valorian conquest. Do you think they have really given up? She asked. Christopher looked at the shattered city around them. They do not have a choice. But I wonder if they truly understand what has happened here. This was not just a military defeat. This was the end of their entire way of thinking. They believed they were the masters of the galaxy. Now they know they are not. Above them, the human fleet maintained its position in orbit. The war was almost over. But the hardest part was still to come. Now humanity had to decide what kind of victors they wanted to be. The surrender ceremony took place in the Great Hall, where the Council had delivered its demands to humanity just months earlier. The beautiful crystal walls were now cracked and blackened from the orbital strikes that had preceded the ground assault. Broken glass crunched under every footstep. President Samuel Green stood at the elevated platform where High Arbiter Zolkith had once presided over the galaxy. Now the positions were reversed. The leaders of the 12 council species were arranged before him in positions of submission. Their heads were bowed. Their weapons had been taken. They waited to learn what fate humanity would choose for them. Ambassador Linda Morris stood at Samuel's side. Her silver diplomatic robes had been replaced by the simple gray uniform of Earth's military government. She had not wanted to be here for this moment. She had worked her entire life for peace between species. Watching the beings she had once called friends kneel before her was painful. But Samuel had insisted she come. "You need to see this through to the end," he had told her. "You tried to stop this war? You failed. Now you need to help build whatever comes next." Samuel looked out at the assembled aliens. They were creatures of incredible variety and ancient power. Some had scales and claws. Others had shells or multiple limbs. A few were beings of pure energy contained in special suits. All of them had thought themselves superior to humanity. All of them had been wrong. Samuel had prepared a long speech for this moment. But standing here, surrounded by the evidence of destruction, the words seemed hollow. He decided to speak simply instead. "I will not pretend that what we did was noble," he began. His voice echoed through the damaged hall. "We killed millions of your people. We destroyed fleets that had served your civilizations for centuries. We burned worlds that had never known violence. There is no glory in any of that." He paused and let his words sink in. Some of the alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others remained perfectly still. "But we did not start this," Samuel continued. "You threatened our children. You told us that our species had grown too large, spread too far, dreamed too much. You wanted to put chains on humanity's future because our potential scared you." High Arbiter Zolkith raised his head slightly, as if to speak. Samuel held up his hand. "I am not finished. You made a critical mistake, High Arbiter. You thought that because we valued peace, we were unable to make war. You saw our love for art and music and individual freedom, and you assumed these things made us weak. You studied our recent centuries of prosperity and calm, but you did not look at our deeper history." Samuel stepped down from the platform and walked among the alien leaders. He met their eyes one by one, human against alien, victor against defeated. "Before we reached the stars, we spent thousands of years killing each other. Every terrible act your imagination can create, we had already done to our own brothers and sisters. We had wars that killed millions. We built weapons that could have destroyed our entire world. We came close to ending ourselves many times." He stopped in front of Zolkith and looked directly at the High Arbiter. "We chose peace because we were exhausted from violence, not because we had forgotten how to fight. When you threatened everything we loved, you woke something old and terrible inside humanity, something we had hoped to leave behind forever." Zolkith's scales shifted to a darker shade. It was an involuntary reaction that showed deep fear. "What do you want from us?" he asked quietly. Samuel returned to the platform before answering. He wanted everyone to hear his next words clearly. "Here are the terms of your surrender. You will break apart your combined military forces. You will give all your weapons technology to a joint human council committee. We will evaluate what to destroy and what to keep. You will accept the complete freedom of all human colonies, including those you claimed were in disputed territory. And you will publicly announce that humanity acted in self-defense against unlawful aggression by the Galactic Council." A wave of shock passed through the alien delegates. These terms were harsh and humiliating, but they were not the total destruction many had feared. However, Samuel continued, "We will not occupy your worlds. We will not tell you how to govern your own people. We will not force you to limit your populations or accept human soldiers on your planets. We are not you." He looked at Linda Morris, who nodded slightly with approval. "This war is over. What happens next depends on whether you have learned anything from it. You can spend the next 1,000 years holding on to your wounded pride and planning revenge. If you do that, we will destroy you completely. We will not hesitate or feel sorry. Or you can accept that the galaxy has changed and find a way to live in it peacefully." Samuel extended his hand toward Zolkith. The gesture was an ancient human custom that meant trust and partnership. "Choose wisely, High Arbiter." A long silence filled the hall. The fate of dozens of civilizations hung in the balance. Zalkith looked at the human hand extended toward him. It was a small, fragile-looking thing compared to his own massive clawed appendages. Yet that small hand belonged to a species that had just defeated the greatest military alliance in galactic history. Slowly, carefully, Zolkith rose to his feet. He extended one of his forearms and grasped Samuel's hand. The grip was awkward and unfamiliar, but both understood its meaning. "We accept your terms," Zolkith said, "and we will remember this day." Morris stepped forward. "Then let us begin the work of building a new relationship between our peoples. Not as masters and servants, but as equals, sharing the same galaxy." Delegate Thrixener of the Mantid Hegemony clicked his limbs together. "How can we trust you? You destroyed us so easily. What stops you from doing it again whenever you want?" Samuel answered honestly. "Nothing stops us. Nothing except our own choice. We could become the tyrants you feared. We could conquer every world and rule the galaxy by force. But that is not who we want to be." He gestured at the ruined hall around them. "Look at what this war has done. Look at the death and destruction. We did this because we had to, not because we wanted to. Humanity wants to explore, to create, to learn. We want to raise our children in peace and build a future among the stars. We do not want to spend our existence as warriors and conquerors." He turned back to Zalkith. "Give us a reason to trust you, and we will give you a reason to trust us. That is how peace works. It does not happen automatically. It must be built, day by day, choice by choice." The High Arbiter bowed his head in acknowledgement. "Then we will begin building." Outside the citadel, word of the surrender spread quickly. Human soldiers lowered their weapons. Alien survivors emerged from hiding. For the first time in weeks, the sounds of fighting were replaced by silence. General Christopher Martinez watched from his command post as the news spread through his troops. Some cheered, others simply sat down in exhaustion. A few wept, though whether from relief or grief, he could not tell. Maria Santos joined him, her uniform still covered in the dust and blood of battle. "We won," she said. "It was not a question." "We survived," Christopher corrected her. "Winning is something else entirely. We will find out in the coming years whether we really won anything at all." The sun set over Varath Prime, painting the damaged skyline in shades of orange and red. A new chapter in galactic history had begun. The question now was what humanity would write in its pages. 5 years had passed since the end of the war. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The old council was completely dissolved, replaced by a new assembly of species where humanity held significant influence but did not dominate. The phase disruptors, those terrible weapons that had turned the tide of battle, were dismantled under careful supervision. Their technology was locked away in vaults that required keys from multiple species to open. Ambassador Linda Morris, now holding the title of Director of the Human Diplomatic Corps, worked every day to rebuild trust between species. It was slow and difficult work. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight. Wounds took time to heal, but progress was being made, one small step at a time. Trade routes that had been closed during the war reopened. Merchant ships carried goods between worlds that had recently been enemies. Cultural exchanges began, carefully at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Artists from different species shared their work. Scientists collaborated on projects that would benefit everyone. The first marriages between humans and aliens were recorded, viewed with curiosity by some and suspicion by others, but celebrated by those who believed in a shared future. On the colony world of New Haven, Captain Daniel Shaw had retired from military service. He now served as the civilian governor of the world he had helped defend. His office had windows that looked out over the valley where he had watched the sunset so many times during the war. Now he watched his grandchildren playing in that valley, running and laughing without any knowledge of the terrible events that had threatened their existence. Maria Santos, who had become his wife 3 years after the war ended, joined him with 2 cups of coffee. She moved more slowly now, her body carrying the permanent marks of battle, but her eyes were still sharp and full of life. The Valorian ambassador is requesting another meeting, she reported. Something about establishing a joint research station in the neutral zone. Daniel took his cup and sipped the hot drink. Tell him I am available next week. And make sure we have proper arrangements for hospitality. I want them to feel welcome when they come. Maria smiled. You really think we can make this work? Real peace, not just the absence of war. I think we have to try, Daniel replied. We proved that we could destroy them. Now we need to prove that we can build something better with them. That is the only way forward. On Earth, President Green had finished his final term in office and passed leadership to his successor. Her name was Angela Reyes, a young woman who had grown up on one of the colonies that the Council had threatened. She had been 12 years old when the war started, old enough to understand the fear, but young enough to still believe in hope. Her first major project was the establishment of the Interspecies Academy, a place where students from all member worlds would study together. They would learn each other's languages, histories, and cultures. They would see each other as individuals rather than potential enemies. Dr. Catherine Bell, who had created the weapons that won the war, now led the Academy's science division. She had spent years haunted by what her inventions had done. Every night she dreamed of the ships she had destroyed, the lives she had ended. The Academy was her chance at redemption. We cannot undo the past, she told her students on the first day of classes. They were a diverse group, including young Valorians, Mantids, and members of the Crystalline Accord sitting alongside humans. But we can shape the future. That is what science is truly about. Not destruction, but creation. Not division, but understanding. A young Valorian raised her hand. Her scales were still the bright purple of youth, not yet darkened with age. How can we trust humans? Your species destroyed our fleet. You burned our worlds. Catherine nodded sadly. Yes, we did. And your species threatened to enslave ours. To control how many children we could have. To put soldiers on our homeworld. Both sides did terrible things. She walked closer to the young alien and knelt so they were at eye level. The question is not whether we can undo those things. We cannot. The question is whether we can choose differently from now on. Your generation and mine have the chance to build something new. Something better than the hatred our parents created. The young Valorian considered this for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I would like to try. In the deepest archives of the new assembly, the records of the war were preserved with complete honesty. Nothing was hidden or made to look better than it was. Future generations, both human and alien, would study what happened and learn from it. The Council's arrogance, humanity's fierce response, the terrible cost of misunderstanding, all of it was recorded without softening the truth. High Arbiter Zolkith, now elderly and retired from public life, submitted his own account to the archives. He had spent years thinking about what had happened and why. His report ended with a warning that future leaders would read for centuries to come. We looked at humanity and saw only their youth, he wrote. We saw their inexperience and their seemingly chaotic nature. We could not see the strength beneath the surface. We threatened them as we had threatened countless others, expecting submission as we had always received. Instead, we learned a truth that should have been obvious from the beginning. Some species learn peace first and discover war only when they must. Others learn war first and discover peace only when they choose it. Humanity belongs to the second group. They do not seek conflict, but they do not run from it either. They do not celebrate destruction, but they will destroy without hesitation when their survival demands it. The galaxy now lives under a human peace. It is not the peace we would have chosen, but it is peace nonetheless. And if we are wise, we will make sure it never needs to be fought for again. The stars continued their endless movement through space, unchanged by the struggles of the species that lived among them. But on 1,000 worlds, children of many different races looked up at the night sky and dreamed of futures without fear. Linda Morris, now in her 70s, gave what would become her most famous speech at the 10th anniversary celebration of the Assembly. She stood before representatives of every known species in the galaxy, her voice still strong despite her years. 10 years ago, we stood on the edge of extinction, she said. Not just humanity, but all of us. The Council's ultimatum would have started a war even if we had surrendered. Other species would have learned to fear. Fear breeds hatred. Hatred breeds conflict. Eventually, everyone would have suffered. She paused and looked around the great hall, so different from the broken chamber where the surrender had been signed. Instead, we learned something important. We learned that strength does not mean domination. We learned that victory does not require cruelty. We learned that the species you defeat today might be the partner you need tomorrow. Her eyes found the Valorian delegation, including several young diplomats who had studied at the Interspecies Academy. Humanity struck back without pity because we had to. But we offer peace without conditions because we choose to. That choice defines us more than any battle ever could. The hall erupted in applause from beings of every shape and size. It was not perfect harmony. There were still disputes, disagreements, and occasional conflicts. Building trust would take generations. But the foundation had been laid. On New Haven, Daniel Shaw watched the speech on his communication screen. Maria sat beside him, her hand in his. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked quietly. Daniel thought about all the battles he had fought, all the lives he had taken, all the terrible decisions he had made during the war. "I think we did what we had to do," he said finally. "And now, we are doing something better. That is all anyone can ask." Outside their window, the sun was rising over a world at peace. Somewhere in the distance, children were laughing. That was humanity's true victory. Not the battles they had won, but the future they had built. And they had only just begun.